for instance, now we're allowing people to, they can create avatars and they can carry them to any platform. There's going to be interoperability needs, because if this becomes the internet, then obviously you can't have a bunch of silo internet. That doesn't benefit anyone.
Welcome to Conversations with Lulu. I am back from summer and I'm very excited to be recording again. I have a fantastic guest lineup for you for the rest of the year, so make sure to tune in. I also have some upgraded audio equipment, so hopefully the sound quality is superb. A quick note before we start, I would love to hear from you. You can contact me on all social media platforms at Lulu Hazen. You can also email me at lulu@conversationswithlulu.com. If you want to give me feedback, if you want to recommend guests, if you want to ask questions to our guests, and if you want to collaborate with me on the podcast. My guest today is the wonderful Fares Akkad. He is the MENA Regional Director at Meta. We're going to talk, of course, about the metaverse and what it really means and what are the implications of the metaverse on our daily lives and for businesses. And we're also going to talk about the creator economy, especially in the MENA region, and what are the opportunities that it's going to unlock. So tune in. So how are you, Fares?
Good to be here, finally.
Yes, finally.
Yes.
What's been happening in
a lot.
Can you give us like an overview?
Well, a lot happening. I think the biggest news is the big pivot we had a few months ago, where we changed our name and kind of cemented our focus to the metaverse, which is like a very, very strategic shift that our founder Mark has kind of made. And to be honest, since then, I think there has been also a lot of noise in the ecosystem about it. It's not like, there's a confusion that we are building the metaverse. It's not that we're building the metaverse, but I think we've taken quite a bold commitment from a name change to, investing to the tune of like $10 billion a year.
Yes.
Which has, I think, probably fair to say, maybe ignited a little bit the discussion. But in parallel, we've also had like a major investment on our existing products. We are doubling down on Reels, which are short form video. We are figuring out a way to target ads with less signals because of the iOS issue. So, there's a lot happening, which is exciting. And then, in the region, we have a lot of activities. We've had the Expo and now we have the World Cup coming up. So we've been busy.
Okay. Well, I do hope to cover as much as possible with you. I mean, I definitely want to talk about the metaverse because it's everything that everyone's talking about, all the conferences, Dubai announcing their metaverse strategy with, with the goal to create 40,000 virtual jobs by 2030. I mean, so much is happening. So maybe in your own words, what is the metaverse?
That's a good question. So look, I mean, the best way I think I can describe it is if we go back, and I think we both can maybe remember, 90s where the internet was just kind of taking off. It was very simple and very hard to imagine like the full magnitude and implication it would have. I think it's important to just kind of set the stage that the metaverse is probably at this stage right now. So a lot of people who are like naysayers or talk about it as a gimmick, I think it's easy to say that about the internet also in the 90s. So because we're looking at a horizon of 5 to 10 years, ultimately what it is, and I think there's consensus in the ecosystem amongst most of the big tech companies, is that this is the next wave of the internet. And it takes if we think of the internet when it first started as very two-dimensional, one-way interaction, and then Web 2.0 made it more engaging and communicative, you're talking about now an immersive internet. And immersive doesn't necessarily have to mean VR, 3D. It could. I mean, that's the kind of the richest version of it. It just means that you're able to be, instead of from outside the internet, interacting from inside the internet. And that might be at some, at the early stages, video conferencing or augmented reality, or using your phone. And then ultimately, our hope is for devices and accessibility to get to a point where everybody will be able to enrich the reality. Again, not to say that nothing can replace being in person. And that's not meant to form this dystopic view of the world where we're going to live in this digital world. However, as COVID has shown us, and due to economic reasons, due to visa reasons, due to logistics reasons, we can't be in some places and sometimes. We can't be with loved ones. We can't attend certain meetings. And if your ability to make those meetings a bit more seamless but richer, I think that has massive implications.
Even I saw His Excellency Omar al-Ulama on a panel yesterday, and said that he was called in to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's office to talk about the metaverse. What is the metaverse? And one of the comments that Sheikh Mohammed made was, His Highness, was that Dubai or the UAE in the metaverse or in virtual reality could potentially have 100 million residents versus 10 million residents in reality. So it's interesting that even at a government level, they're seeing this opportunity.
No, 100%. And I got to give credit to the UAE and Dubai in particular. They have been so forward-leaning on this that I remember when we had Sheryl Sandberg here in March, and she met with His Highness the Crown Prince. And, on the spot, he's like, we want to be the city of the metaverse. Yeah. And I had the opportunity to see him again in a suhoor a few weeks later, and he reiterated that, and he called for some of his deputies and action, some momentum. And after that, you started seeing all these things like in typical Dubai fashion, a lot of wheels started turning. It's very exciting because I think the opportunities are limitless. To the example you just mentioned, during Expo, we broadcasted a series of concerts, something like 60, that would take place in the Wasl Plaza, but we would take them through Horizon World, which is our venues platform.
I'm going to ask you about that, by the way. That's my next question, but let's...
So just to finish the thought, and where, some of the big concerts like Coldplay or Alicia Keys would get a couple of thousand people in the plaza, and that was like jam-packed, we would get millions watching it on Oculus. And in one occasion, which I thought was interesting, a head of an agency, a friend of mine, was saying, I'm watching the Coldplay concert in person, but I also have my phone watching it in Horizon World because I can get a better vantage point, because you could be on stage, or you could get a lot more of an interesting angle. So it definitely is to enrich the experience.
Okay. So, because I hear when I hear about the metaverse, there's always like this experiential, like these words that always come out: embodiment, right? Immersive. These are all the words. So I always thought that it means, you have to have a virtual reality, a Quest headset or some other virtual reality headset on your head to be able to experience it.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's not necessarily that.
Not necessarily that. I think.
So it's infrastructure. Is it like really what the internet was, and its infancy?
Yes, I think ultimately, realistically speaking, today we have the headsets. I think the headsets, as you see them, they could be quite bulky to wear, all day. We're conscious of that. Mm-hmm. There's also an accessibility in terms of price, infrastructure, and this requires strong bandwidth to be able to have a rich experience. So there's some catching up to do on the hardware. The experience and what you can do on the metaverse, though, will not be restricted to this kind of hardware. Okay. I think you can do it on your laptop, on your tablet, you can do it on your phone. And the majority of people, initial engagement with the metaverse will be with those devices that are now omnipresent and available. Our goal, and something that we're working on aggressively, is to try to get these devices, to a size and functionality that is much more manageable, so down maybe to the size of a pair of glasses. And then also in terms of cost, affordability, where the majority of the population can own them and interact with them. Today, these are the most common and most available, I would say, devices. There's about 10 million out there, and their sales continue to increase. They've actually surpassed the sales of many consoles like Xbox, etc. So they are on a very good trajectory. We have a new one coming out in October.
Okay.
And
so the Quest 3?
It's gonna have a different name.
Okay.
Potentially,
Will it be the same size as this one?
It's going to be with major improvements. Actually, it's going to have.
Because this is quite heavy.
It can be, yeah. So it's going to have a lot of increased efficiency in terms of battery, etc. But that's not the main advantage. I think there's a couple of things, and I don't want to give too much away, but like a couple of things that are pretty cool. One is this one is mainly on the virtual front. The other one will also take into consideration AR. So it will not just put you in a virtual world, but you'll also be able to interact with your environment. So you'll have some augmented reality features to it, which I think will be pretty cool. Which I think also a lot of studies and research is showing that people don't necessarily want to disconnect from the real world. They want to enrich and be able to interact with the real world with more information. It will also allow you to track your facial features. So your avatars will be able to engage, you will be able to reflect your facial gestures, like if you're frowning or you're smiling, your avatar will be able to reflect
your avatar that you see where, like, if so
in your virtual representation in the metaverse.
Okay.
And the logic here is a couple of things that I think Mark has spoken about. This is one, there was initially a huge push to make avatars hyper realist. Like, I want to see you exactly the way you are, and most people want to be represented. But actually, that's not necessarily the case for everyone.
Okay.
What many people want to or prefer to be in the metaverse, manifesting in a different way. They want to be creative in the way they look, or change from time to time, etc. What they do care about, though, is the transfer of emotions. Like, they want to be able to express themselves. So, when you frown and you smile, and there's so many signals, body signals that we send that are not spoken, that are incredibly important for communication. So that's why that feature is quite key. The other thing that is important is also what you focus on. So if you notice, many of the avatars don't have like legs, and they don't have.
That was one of the biggest critique, basically.
They don't have arms. They focus on the hands, and that's, again, because most of the expressions are not, you're not looking at my elbow. You're kind of either my hands or my face. So the focus is on how do you maximize the communication. So it's a learning process, but as these devices improve, not only it's the size, and we're doing this pilot with Ray-Ban, where we have the augmented reality glasses. But the goal is also, because Ray-Ban, they're the experts about how the glasses sit on your nose and the weight, etc. The ultimate goal is, yes, to make them very weight feasible and practical, but also to learn about what people want to do in the metaverse and how they best can interact in the metaverse. And that's why the focus from saying hyperrealism to no, let's allow more variations of the avatar. Let's allow people to maybe express their different interests or different looks or religious beliefs, or in that world.
Which actually leads us to a very philosophical question, I think, because you can be yourself and physical. You have physical Fares, and then you have virtual Fares, and Fares, the virtual, can be a completely different person, as you said, the gender, look, etc. And so, is there a point where, like, which one's real? Like, which one is the real you, right? Because
I mean, it's just like, I mean, this is a much wider debate, I guess, but I think it's all the real you. If it stems from you and this is the way you choose to express yourself, then who's to tell you that's not you? It's on us to allow you the tools to be able to do that seamlessly, provide you the safety to make sure that you are safe and protected in that world, and that you're also not invading other people's sensitivities and privacy in that world. But then it's a beautiful way to be able to express yourself.
Is there a risk that your virtual life might be much more interesting than your actual life, and you might get sucked into it?
I mean, I think, I doubt this is quite a dystopic view of how we function. I don't think, like I said, I don't believe there's a day where people will choose to not be in the real world.
Okay.
It's
It's
to
like
me,
that movie, Surrogates, you remember?
yeah, it's unrealistic. I think it's a good outlet, and what we've seen, we've seen many examples about there are certain instances where you might want to disconnect. And I'll give you an example I posted about on social media this week, actually. In Lebanon, there's this anesthesiologist that is using Oculus for kids when they submit them to anesthesia. It's part of the LAU University. And apparently kids, go through a lot of anxiety when they experience anesthesia. Like it causes them panic and they don't understand what's going on. And so she puts these Oculus glasses on, and she puts them in like a very soothing environment. They're watching their favorite cartoons. So it creates a little bit of a disconnection with reality, just so they can go through this period. And then when they're waking up, it's not a shock. It's not something that we commissioned or did. This is completely like grassroots activity, but it's amazing. Yeah. And I think it's examples like this that I think will more likely flourish. It's people finding interesting uses for this technology. Similar thing with internet, where people said, it's going to be all in this internet world, etc. Internet now is interweaved as every aspect of our life. Most of us can't imagine now functioning or living without the internet, but it doesn't mean that we're no longer human.
I think, by the way, one of the most interesting things is to watch your kids when you put the Oculus on. I do the same. I mean, my kids are very young, and I put like these either like animals or safari or ocean or something like that, and just the expression on their faces is really like priceless.
It's mind-blowing.
I have to hold them sometimes, like just to remind them that we're here. Obviously, I don't do it extensively because I don't know what the implications are on someone who's as young, but it's such a beautiful sight to see.
Try it on parents or grandparents. Like I've tried it on older folks, and it's really mind blowing because the kids don't have a point of reference, but the older folks, it's like the immediate reaction is like you just kind of, taking them to a parallel universe.
Yes.
It takes some time getting used to. There's also still some technological advances, and the latency that happens, which many people say, I'm dizzy, which is usually caused by the very, very minor latency, which you might not be conscious of it, but your eye recognizes it and you feel this. So all these things will get better. That's a question of advancement. But once you're in a place where you're able to take your kids, and if you're teaching them about ancient Rome, put them in ancient Rome, and they're walking down the streets and hearing the sounds and interacting with the characters and seeing the Colosseum in its prime and actually attending a gladiator fight. How enriching is that, right? That's incredibly, it's irreplaceable. This is not something you can show in a story or in a movie, because everybody learns their own way. And then there's nothing like reality to teach you that.
It feels very real.
If you're a medical student, or if you're a doctor and trying to, you're doing a surgery and you're able to, be in the arteries, actually have a view, like an immersive view of what you're doing, the implications are limitless. So the dystopic view of we're going to live in this, I think is probably so small compared to the potential benefits of what we can read.
So where would you stand? I mean, you have children as well, right? And I think children will grow up in a physical and hybrid environment more and more. Meta is building the portion of the metaverse. I mean, and there's so much going on. So how do you see it? Like, if I had to ask you, if you like project 10 years time, like what can they do, you think, on the digitally on the metaverse?
I mean, for starters, I think it's my kids are young. I think it'd be part of their education. There'll be at least elements of it where they are able to learn many of the things. The way we teach today is not always same size fit all. There's consensus that experimental type of teaching works a lot better. If kids are doing, they learn more. And imagine if they are there, right? Take a walk down the Milky Way and learn about the solar system. I think that's going to be a must. I think as they graduate, their options about workplace and where they need to be, and especially coming from developing markets, accessibility to developed markets and the polarization that's going on in the world. If somebody can have a job in a different continent and go to work every day and still at home.
Teleport, right? Is the term
kind
that's
of,
being
yeah.
used?
I mean, you can. We have that now, by the way. Like within Facebook, we have workplace tools where you can attend a meeting, and many of our colleagues, we attend meetings in Oculus.
While using Oculus.
Yeah, while using Oculus,
Okay.
and you can have someone presenting, and you're listening to them presenting, and we can have a side conversation, and the audio depth will differ, so it feels very real. I'm seeing your avatar. We can create a notebook and take notes, and I can pass a note to you while that person's still presenting. We can have a side meeting. Like, it's very, very real.
Okay.
So that facilitates, that, and especially we've learned that we can work from home for extended period of time. So I think the idea of I need to migrate somewhere to maybe get a job will change. I need to go somewhere to study might change. I think your ability to interact with different people from around the world will change. One of the features we're working on, because again, we're not building the metaverse, but we're building the infrastructure for people to build on. So one of the key features is this feature called No Language Left Behind. So the ability to simultaneously translate any language to any language.
Okay.
So this will be kind of an API. So anybody who's building a tool on the metaverse, you could have whatever, a game or educational tool, and you can plug that in. And imagine language not being a barrier, right? The amount of increased understanding and the amount of increased communication that could have. So I'd like to think that my kids can have a much easier mobile life than the one I've had, and I've been very blessed. But it will make it a lot more seamless.
But there is this. I mean, okay, this is the positive, right? But there is. I mean, we can't not talk about like some of the concerns basically that people are raising. So, for example, I was listening to a podcast recently called Land of the Giants, where they talk about Facebook's transformation into Meta and the big $10 billion bet on the metaverse, etc. And they talk about Horizon, which is, I think, your new social media platform, right? Like the Facebook equivalent of the metaverse. And they said that like some of the beta users basically are starting to, like beta users are early users of the platform, are starting to request features like, I don't want him in my personal
bubble,
virtual space. Yeah. Someone said something inappropriate. I mean, of course, these things happen in real life everywhere all the time, right? And on social media, it's somewhat. I mean, there's rules, regulations that can falter, and we know that. So how will it work, you think, in the metaverse?
Look, with every technology, there's going to be new frontiers of good and bad. I think the examples you mentioned, these are examples of things that you build, and just like with some of the cyberbullying that sometimes happened, right? Some people behavior, you're right, some people behave in the real world. Now, these things can happen in the real world, but they seem to be sometimes exaggerated in the digital world. For starters, I think we have a decent experience from what we've been through, because we are the largest social media platform in the world, so we have a good starting point. But this is a new dimension. So I think one of the things we're doing is we're investing $50 million a year in like research, academic institutions, civil rights organizations, etc., to get input, and think tanks, and like what could potentially go wrong and how we could mitigate it. The other thing that has happened also on social media that was a good learning experience is many of the digital companies, just not just us, moved at such a pace that regulators and government were way behind. So usually the regulation would come, most of the policymakers didn't even understand half the stuff that was happening. So I think there's a concerted effort now to try to kind of walk together and say, okay, look, this is what we're trying to do. Let's all agree, because it's not our place to necessarily govern this new world. I think we have a responsibility to try to put as many guardrails as we can, But yeah, like one of the things, like now there's the ability for you to have a bubble. Like you can say, an avatar can come this close to me. There has to be moderation. There has to be, community standards that apply, etc. At the end of the day, it's a reflection of the real world, right? As much as possible. So I think it doesn't dissolve our ability to be human. But because you have potentially some more flexibility in that digital world, then you need to build for that, right? But with just like any technology, I think the benefits need to outweigh the harm, and you just need to mitigate as you go along.
I think the anonymity is an issue, right? I mean, if you look at on Twitter, for example, I mean, you have obviously there's all this talk about bots and stuff, and it's just, I think when people aren't connected to an identity, they tend to behave really badly. And that's, I think, one of the things, I personally have a concern over when you have like an avatar, because maybe if this Lulu, virtual Lulu, is tied to the real Lulu, maybe there are guardrails, right? Because I have a reputation or I have certain values, but maybe I can go rogue, you know what I mean? And just, so I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, look, that's a philosophical difference, for instance, between us and Twitter. Like Facebook is actually you're not meant to be anonymous on Facebook. So, and you're not meant to have more than one account. Because of the reason that you need to be tied to an account, and also when you create an account on Instagram, then they tie it to Facebook, so you have identity. Not saying that some people might not, but it gets more and more complicated as you're trying to tie accounts and create things. And yes, you owning your comments and owning your interactions on the platform is important as this takes place. And I think also other things like NFTs. And when you introduce things like crypto and stuff, will start taking more of a role in being part of your digital identity. So I can see NFTs very easily being your kind of digital ID. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I think as the interactions get more complex, there's going to be more of a need by regulators and others for you to, you can represent yourself in different ways, but you have to link it to your identity.
Okay. Because the NFTs. So for those that are not very familiar, it's basically it's on the blockchain. It's
non-fungible tokens.
Yes, and it's a digital identity, or it's a digital file, right?
Yes.
It's digital media.
It's a digital media that's.
Today, it's a digital media.
It's non-replicable, so it's the one instance of, and therefore, in theory, a lot more reliable, right? So today it's mostly used for digital art, and people can buy it and sell it. But the beauty of it is that that this is one instance of 10, and yes, there won't be more, and it's not fake, and et cetera, et cetera. But the implications of its use are endless. Okay. Again, ultimately, this could be a plane ticket, it could be a train ticket, it could be an ID. And because of the security and scrutiny around it, it's a lot more reliable. And this is something that you can't necessarily lose or drop, and it exists in the digital world and ties to you. So those are all building blocks of that metaverse, and therefore I think when they come together, yes, the tools are there to create a little bit more of this safety.
So I don't know, maybe this is a stupid question. Is the metaverse is built on blockchain? No.
Yes. I'm getting too technical. I'm not an engineer, but blockchain is a part of the infrastructure.
Okay. All right. Okay. One last question, I think, on that, and I'm gonna change, but I'm genuinely very curious about it. Let's talk about like the interoperability, right? So if I am, like today on the internet, right, if I am signed up on Facebook, then I have to create a new account on Twitter and whatever other website. Do you see that happening in the metaverse as well? Like, especially with digital assets and things like that? So
no, I think for instance, now we're allowing people to, they can create avatars and they can carry them to any platform. Okay. So once you have your avatar, you can kind of take it to any platform. I think there's going to be interoperability needs, because if this becomes the internet, then obviously you can't have a bunch of silo internet. That doesn't benefit anyone. there there could be different differentiating factors in
Yeah.
different environments, but ultimately there has to be the interoperability, and there'll be what we call these APIs, which basically like you can plug between different environment, and then people will be able to interact and go from environment to environment. That holistic view of it is what brings value. Being in these silo environments, which is where we are maybe a little bit today. It's one-offs, is not what's going to make this a success. I think once everyone sees the value, then there's going to be demand for some sort of normalization.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the creator economy, right? Because that's like another big topic that everyone's talking about. There's, what I love about it is that it's like it's cool now to be a creator. If you think about it, 10 years ago you had to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. I think today it's people have different ways of expressing themselves, which is amazing. So how do you see that growing? And maybe if you can take like a MENA perspective.
Sure. So for starters, actually, there are a lot of creators in MENA. So if we look at the numbers that we track of people who self-declare themselves on the platform as creators,
okay,
we are almost like we have more creator than the UK or
as MENA, okay,
or Germany, and almost as many as the US. Okay. So there's a lot of numbers, right? And what we see a lot in MENA, it's good and bad. So we don't see a lot of development, as in technical development. Like, we don't see a lot of R&D, etc. So innovation usually is imported here. But once it's developed, we see massive uptake, very rapid uptake, because we have a very young population, high mobile penetration.
Okay. Can you give an example, though? What do you mean by like we don't have R&D?
For instance, we won't develop reels here or digital video. But then on our platform, digital video consumption is twice the global average.
Okay.
2x the global average in MENA.
Okay, so we're mostly consumers.
We're consumers, but it also means that we also create, right? Like it also means that we have a lot of creators, we have a lot of content. Usually it starts with consumption, and then there's a vacuum for Arabic, and then that vacuum gets filled through creator, etc. And so in that sense, there's a lot of creativity that comes out of MENA, and there's many also global creators that have come out of MENA or decided to relocate to MENA, which is also interesting. Something else, interesting stat, we did a study about the likelihood of consumers to engage with brands. And 86% said they're more likely to engage with a brand that is promoted by a creator, an influencer.
Wow.
Because usually they have this trust built with this influencer or this creator, and that carries over to
it's still
the
case
brand.
Because that was the case like when influencers started becoming famous and getting paid to collaborate, etc. But I think people realize that these are paid collaborations. So still you're saying
still there's a high percentage now. Again, this is like holistic data.
Okay.
It depends from creator to creator, and now also, by the way, we make sure when it's a sponsored ad, we encourage brands and creators to link that. So if you sometimes you'll see a sponsored ad, and it'll say
on Instagram, for
on
example.
Instagram, you'll say sponsored ad, paid ad by a certain brand. And that does three things. One, it provides transparency to the audience that you're watching a commercial, effectively. Two, it gives the brand visibility into the performance of that campaign. So, so it's not dependent on the creator saying, "Oh, it did great. Here's some stats." No, they see exactly how that performed.
Okay.
And then three, because that content usually is commissioned by the brand can get to say, "All right, I like it, but it underperformed in Morocco or overperformed here. I'm going to put some money directly into the campaign and push it on this angle or to this segment."
So into that piece of content.
Into that piece of content,
okay.
right? And so then it's treated like a campaign.
Okay.
But what I'm talking about is not necessarily always just brands. It's also trends. It's advice. It's things, and not all creators are always pushing that, right? So there is a trust that is built, especially with creators that take that matter seriously. There's subject matter experts that do certain industries, and they are trusted. The difference is, I think, when a creator has credibility and they're followed for a while, there's a lifestyle association, whether it's aspirational or like-minded. I follow you because we like the same things. So when you recommend a podcast or you recommend to me a book, I'm much more likely to like it than if I just see an ad, right? Because I kind of feel like I have a good understanding of what you like and we have many things in common. So I think it's that link, again, back to a human link, right? That many people feel like they know the creators. And so being authentic, being real comes through, and being consistently authentic and real comes through. And those type of creators, yeah, they transfer very well to credibility, and it shows in the results. Again, the transparency that we provide now as a platform to the brand on the creator performance allows creators who yield results, who like made the right investment, to be able to reap the benefit. So I think a lot of brands now are a lot more aware and ask for the right data. They say, show me your demographics, where's your audience, what's the breakdown, male, female, how many do you have in this country, what's your age groups, and then you can test campaigns before you further invest. So to your point, because initially there was this wave and then like, well, I don't know where the money's going, but I think now there is better attribution of these campaigns to results.
But that benefits the big, basically, content creators, or like one of the issues. I'll give you a personal example, actually. So when you have a podcast, for example, you either have to go directly to a sponsor, right? Because the media agencies, you're not that big unless you're very big, which obviously a lot of content creators are not there yet. Plus, I don't know if you have that scale here in this region. Maybe you do at a certain level. Vis-a-vis the US, for example, as a market, but it's so fragmented. So like the brand would say, I can't be bothered like spending whatever $1,000 a year, $2,000. So they don't really work with you. And I would assume it's the same maybe for the smaller creators on these platforms.
Look, it depends. It depends what the brand is trying to do, right? If it's what we call like a top of the funnel brand that's just kind of mass market, they're trying to reach as many people as possible. You're right. It's about quantity and maybe some relevance.
So it's like,
but there are some very niche plays that I think focus on very targeted markets. And if you're able, I would argue, to have a niche following that has massive engagement, then that is kind of very like-minded, etc. That can be very valuable for the right kind of brand. So, if you're a bank that does private wealth management, or if you are De Beers or Cartier, they don't advertise everywhere. I mean, they're not mass consumption. So you see them in the brand association that they do is very, very specific. They even have mandates around what ads come before them and what ads come after them. And, they're very particular about protecting the brand, rightfully, because they are targeting a very specific segment. So if you are that provider that has that niche, I think you have a very coveted market. If you are very mass, then it doesn't mean, you might get that, but you're also getting all sorts of things, and it's just a different play. So I think if you're small and you're mass, then yes, then you just got to get the mass. But it's also a very crowded space. So I always think if you have a smaller but very, very engaged following of like-minded followers, then it's very, very hard to get that, and it's very coveted.
And you're saying now, like through the Meta platforms, maybe particularly Instagram, like brands are able to see the performance of these.
They're able to see
videos, and so therefore, it helps creators monetize.
Yeah, I mean, they're able to see, and I think also as a creator, as you get more sophisticated, the way you sell yourself and the way you pitch yourself is very important, right? It's you have to be consistent. You have to decide what your positioning is. Be consistent on it. I've seen situations where creators were approached, and then the brand will go through their account and then see something completely off brand, like they're like, yeah, they back down, because also brands, once they associate with you, they associate with you for a while. So I need to know that this is going to be this for a while. Like if I sponsor you and then you decide to go and do something else, that reflects on my brand, right? So you're consistent, you're on brand, and the way you sell yourself also in a very kind of data-driven, case study-driven manner is how brands, sophisticated brands, are thinking now, right? They think, okay, this is a professional, and this is someone who gives me the comfort and reliability that is going to be on brand with my brand.
Do you publish any data on like how much are, for example, people in the creator economy making in this region? Like,
we don't necessarily. I mean, I think there's many ways people make money. One is you could have a content and you allow us to sell ads, and we revenue share, and you make some money on the ads, or video ads, or on your content. We could also you could do a sponsored content sponsorship, which means you get paid to create a piece of content, and then the brand boosts it. So you get you get the sponsorship money, and the brand works with us on the boosting. But there's also a massive amount of money which is off platform, right? So you have the likes of Salt Bay, or you have the likes of others that use the platform to market their offline businesses, and those are massive, right? Many of the startups will have roughly in their P&L 40%. If you're a business to consumer, 40% of your budget will go to marketing. So if you're able to reduce that or remove that off the P&L by having a massive platform where you talk directly to your consumer, that's why many celebrities launch brands. That's worth a lot of money. Now that we don't have visibility to, because it's, we can estimate, but it's off platform money. And if you are able to, again, if you have like a very engaged following and they trust you, and you launch a product and they go buy it, whether you're selling it online or offline, that is worth a lot of money. And I've seen VCs also start to invest in that. So they come to you and say, if you're a massive influencer and you're launching that kind of product, there's something that you're bringing to the table that might have not cost you anything, but is very valuable moving forward.
Yeah. Which is what happened with Huda Beauty,
exactly.
I think, which is a great success story.
Great success story. And the ladies are incredibly smart. Hi to them. Yeah. And they've done a fantastic job. And they're a perfect example of someone who's like on brand. They've never promoted anything they didn't believe in. And they just did something with such passion and credibility that they have the mass and they have the following. So it's a perfect combination.
So you see more of that happening in our region, because I don't want to talk about global numbers. I mean, here.
Look, I see a lot of that happening in our region. I see also a lot of need for education in our region. Like
educating brands, basically.
Educating brand, but also educating influencers.
Okay.
Like many influencers are so hung up sometimes on how much am I going to make for this and how much can I make for that, and they don't think big picture. They don't think about personal brand, and the big picture thing. If you look at the global successes, these are people that have had like a much more long-term strategy around their personal brand, where they want to be, what they want to stand for, and what type of influence they want to have. Yeah, you mentioned the Kattan sisters, great example. There's a couple of examples from Turkey that I've seen, many chefs that have done this. But globally, there's a ton of examples.
And are you doing something as Meta to educate more, or maybe to financial support, subsidize, I don't know, etc.?
Look, we do a lot of workshops with creators. We actually have something we call a House of Instagram. We're doing one in Saudi next month, where we bring creators and brands and we talk about the power of Instagram and how they can come together. We do this exercise with SMEs called Meta Boost. We just launched one in Qatar. We're launching one in Saudi. We had one in the UAE where we basically take these startups and talk to them about how they can best optimize their marketing budgets, how they can use our tools to tell their story, not just from a paid campaign standpoint, but also from an organic standpoint. Like, how do you make your content interesting so the organic reach can be higher? We work during COVID. We did this thing called Love Local, which is how to encourage people to shop locally. Work with the laundromat down the street or the grocery store. These are mom and pop shops that were forced to go online and they had no experience in how they can do that. So we play a big part in different sectors of the economy. We trained 10,000 journalists last year, and journalism is one of those very hard hit, not just by COVID or the economy, but by trends, like who reads newspapers anymore, right? Everybody's going online, and most of these journalists have been trained in writing these long articles, and everybody now is, as I said, video. So how can you tell your stories in video storytelling? This creates economic opportunity, creates economic impact, but also engages people, helps them find jobs, engages people in the new economy a lot more.
Yeah. What happened with your algorithms recently? There was a huge uproar and basically people saying that there was something that changed and...
On Instagram?
On Instagram.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're constantly tweaking the algorithm. And now there's a big push to try to also, experiment, to try to address the consumer needs in different formats, etc. One of our big pushes is Reels, which is the short form video, which obviously there's massive interest now. It's very popular, etc. And also the trying to encourage people to explore beyond their following circle, which is
more of a discovery.
More of a discovery experience than just following your friends and family or influencers. And that doesn't always land well. And every time we try, first at one point all the feed was chronological, and when we shifted it from chronological, there was an uproar. And I think we need to find the happy medium. I think Adam Missouri, our head of Instagram, came out and publicly said, "Look, I know maybe we're moving too quick. We'll tweak it back." Ultimately, we recognize that many people came to Instagram because they love pictures. Like when Instagram came out, it was all about the pictures, right? And then video came, and many people are still very loyal to pictures, and pictures not going away, but we see an incredible trend in video, like increased interest in video. And now people are saying, "Oh, you're going to the short form Reels." I mean, Reels is now 20% of the consumption of Instagram and growing incredibly fast. So there's always people who want the new, but there's always people who want the old, are not ready to move to the new or want to stick with the old. And so it's about finding the balance. And yeah, there's very smart people working on like constantly tweaking to make everyone happy.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions and we can wrap. Do you have any predictions that will any tech predictions, winners, losers, and in the social space or in the metaverse space, or anything that you can share?
I think digital products is going to be quite a big thing, and somebody explained it to me, which I was surprised. Somebody told me they went to a digital concert, and they bought a digital T-shirt, and I said, even for me, that's like, what do you? And he's like, no, but I do a lot of gaming and I spend a lot of time online, and so if I buy a concert T-shirt, I probably wear it a couple of times, and I wear the same thing. Like, I think the value we associate with digital products will start taking more and more relevance moving forward. So if you have kids and they play games and they go buy these shields or skins and stuff, I think that's going to become more pervasive. I think return to office and like work from there'll be a bit more of a correction. Like there was this huge thing that nobody's going to, I think that's going to go back. And this is maybe not very digital, but I think the human touch, the need to interact, the healthy friction that happens in the workplace, I think there's going to be some sort of happy medium there. I'm seeing it. And I think this correction also is going to affect many, it's already happened, like many industries that really spiked during COVID, like food order, cloud kitchens, Zoom. I mean, Zoom at one point was valued more than all airlines combined. I remember one time during COVID, I read that stat. It was like crazy.
Wow.
That's not going to happen anymore because there's increased competition, but also there's like, okay, sometimes I want to have a meeting. But like all this major investment that went into cloud kitchens, they're all now hurting. Valuations have gone down. And I can probably overreaction, it'll correct a little bit, but it won't be what it was during lockdown. Gaming will continue to grow. I think gaming will figure out a way to also go into non-gamers, which is what happens here. Like the fastest category now is gaming. But the second is social engagement, which is like workplace, dating, etc. And then the third is fitness. And I think massive space for fitness in this space, like the ability to have a trainer in front of you, etc. Convenience. And I think these things will happen fairly quickly. That's what will happen in the first 5 years. And then the following 5 years will be like the more elaborate things.
It's going to be exciting to see. I think there's an opportunity there also for the creator economy also to participate in the digital world. I mean, you mentioned the T-shirt example. Like my first reaction is, oh my God, like I'm gonna have to buy, a Gucci shoe offline and a Gucci shoe online. I mean, that's just insane.
Look, it might start out by the brands like saying, okay, if you buy offline, we'll give you the online.
Okay.
But I think soon after it'll be like, no, you gotta pay extra for the online.
Okay. Well, it's gonna be interesting to see how it's gonna evolve for sure. Thank you so much, Fares,
My pleasure.
for your time.
This was fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Conversations with Lulu, and hope you enjoyed the conversation with Fares. He was truly wonderful. As usual, you can visit the show's website, conversationswithlulu.com, or you can follow us on all social media platforms at Lulu Khazan. You can also sign up to Apple Podcasts or YouTube to get the latest episode. If you love the show, we'd love to hear from you. Please do reach out and leave us a review. Wishing you lots of love and light, and see you in a couple of weeks.